right? You must be the one behind all this. Show yourself.
Didi, but how could you?
Yo, what's good, fam? Instrumentality's on that we good again. And we flipping out like the end of my brim. Tryna get that good, so I throw in the fin. Getting it in, living it win, reminiscing. We can give a fuck about tomorrow's begin. So we at Water Tower till they think that we residents. Posted on walls like Facebook messages.
Let's be honest with ourselves. The current age of streaming is nowhere near the golden opportunity it once was. We went from companies literally fighting tooth and nail to offer their best and brightest for our eyes, to what feels like most companies that aren't Disney going completely scorched earth with their programming. In the era of streaming and digital releases, the media that we consume is under the allowance of the corporations that own them now more than ever. It's sad to say, but there was a point in time where this wasn't necessarily the case. Companies offered DVDs, VHSs, iTunes releases, or literally any other kind of physical release that the previous generations used to their advantage. Whether shelving or taking down their own media, corporations have proven to do anything they want by taking down numerous of shows for a new direction of some kind, as long as it doesn't affect their bottom line. And as pathetic as it is to make watching these shows more difficult to accomplish, it's comforting to know that they still can exist. Cause what if I told you that there was a whole untapped realm of Cartoon Network movies that exist as merely ghost stories of some kind? I mean, the trend of CN movies technically started with the first Powerpuff Girls movie, which made the possibility of other CN movies look more slim by the day. However, as fun as thinking of the could'ves, would'ves, and should'ves would be, what already happened happened. Even then, the unknown is far more interesting, and there's almost no likely chance of these movies coming to fruition. That's why I'm here, to talk about why they might have never gotten to see the light of day, and the ideas I think could have made these movies worthwhile for the public to see. This is supposed to be a fun video, but also a wake-up call to these big suits, cause to put it simply, they don't know how to act. Well, what better way to start off the list than giving it to humanity's biggest piece of bravado? You know, Johnny Bravo. That's right, no AI cash grab. There was a movie being concocted for the big, brawly Johnny Bravo back in the 2000s. Ever since it started in 1997, the show quickly cemented itself as essentially one of the founding fathers of the network. It had a really charming gimmick of women besting the titular character's advancements towards them, tackling the concept of toxic masculinity around the time the term came into fruition. However, episodes such as The Man Who Cried Clown or Johnny Meets Adam West proved that Johnny could expand into stories that go beyond the usual plot. And thanks to that, the show's popularity would not only catch the eyes of many viewers, but the eyes of producers Neil Mortis and Marty Adelstein to work with Van Partible on a feature film. The movie script and ace up their sleeve would be set in stone, starring Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, which, honestly, was probably the best role they could have gotten. Aside from a brolic guy like David Hasselhoff or Dave Bautista, there wasn't really any other choice that could have possibly played the part. The Rock was stated to have also been a fan of the show anyways, so it seemed perfect. A little too perfect. Cause you know when Warner Bros got the copyright for Johnny Bravo? 2002. And you know, aside from anything prominent with Warner Bros in 2002, you wanna know when Johnny Bravo ended? 2004. So you got the copyright, that other thing, and The Rock getting into blockbusters like The Rundown. Yeah, needless to say, the movie couldn't pick up any internal traction, whether from the fading relevance of the IP or the exploding popularity of the movie's star, which really does suck, because I think a plot that expanded upon Johnny's masculinity in a more psychologically introspective angle would be incredibly interesting for the big screen. That, alongside the wacky hijinks and the comedic stretch from a bigger budget, would actually make the banter between Johnny, Bunny, Little Susie, and the rest of the cast a delight. It's just sad to see that there wasn't much confidence put into a movie like Johnny Bravo. Out of any of the 2010s Cartoon Network shows that could have been made for a movie, would you have thought that one of the options was the one that has whip crack sound effect compilations online? Yeah, I didn't think so. But yes, the episodic show of a kid with a head of fiery hair and a turbocharged backpack could have gotten a movie, surprisingly enough. While the show did have some continuity to it, as a whole, the series just focused more so on the antagonist of the week. So if there was a movie, it would probably have to be a gigantic collaboration of every Johnny Test villain going after his family. And if the movie's message came from the importance of Johnny balancing between his family and his own needs in life, it would be amazing to watch to relax from the chaos that the show would normally have. The movie idea wouldn't have had to been deep either. Maybe an adventure centered around the dog, Dookie, would be fun to have as a simple story. However, much like Johnny Bravo's movie, it doesn't have any semblance of a plot, and barely any cast either. Now, why would that be? Well, for one, the primary rights holder, Cookie Jar Entertainment, was reported to be in discussions of a Johnny Test movie around 2012, but the cartoons lined up between 2011 and 2014 coincided with the show's last 2 official seasons. Again, like the other Johnny, the show was on its way out. Second, there were some rights issues that persisted from the show's start, going from Warner Bros. Animation to Cookie Jar Entertainment, and ending with the show going down with Cookie Jar in 2014. Third reason? Kinda interesting to say the least. As we all know from that iconic intro, at the end of it, we see the show's creator, Scott Fellows, credited like any other showrunner. However, what wasn't talked about as much was the other creator of the show, David Straighten. In the 90s, Straighten and Fellows came up with the show's concept and presented it to Nickelodeon. After it was rejected, the pair parted ways, without knowingly terminating the partnership itself. So, in 2005, when Fellows presented the concept to CN by himself, the executives at the time took it as just Fellows as the lead, which would be somewhat fair, since the show was allegedly conceptualized by the guy's childhood. But because the partnership was never officially terminated, when Straighten found out about the show years later, he filed a complaint in 2013 to gain some kind of credit or compensation for the show's success. This would allegedly lead the show to be cancelled, despite the situation possibly being resolved outside of court. But without going off the rails too much, those reasons would at least note that Johnny Test would have been slim pickings for a movie. Despite the ideas that could have ran, it's more fun to ponder on than anything, because now, from this point forward, it'll get more convoluted from here on out. Out of the network's lineup that aired in the 2000s, none of them could have ever reached the dramatic and precise heights that Samurai Jack took. Well, I guess maybe Symbionic Titan or the 2003 Star Wars series could count here, considering all 3 were created by industry legend Genndy Tartakovsky. And that industry legend title isn't anything to scoff at either. Multiple awards and nominations, multiple shows under his decade-long belt of credits, and the former series in discussion being one of the most solid projects he's ever made is a testament to the craftsmanship it took to create such a project. What said accolades also consider is the amount of confidence Cartoon Network had in Genndy. Speaking technically, Samurai Jack did have a premiere movie for TV at the start of its run on August 10th, 2001. However, it was not only more than a compilation of episodes, but the best way to help introduce the audience to this new series, leading to the aforementioned 4-season run, until it abruptly ended on September 25th, 2004. Not much was said about the show afterwards, until news came up 5 years later about a 2D/3D hybrid Samurai Jack movie, led by J.J. Abrams, his producing company Bad Robot Productions, alongside Frederator Films, and a $20 million budget to boot. It sounds great for a proposed movie like this to start off with, but unfortunately, a lot of obstacles would come into play that demolished any expectations of reaching the silver screen. For one, the voice actor who played the evil wizard Aku, Mako, tragically passed away in 2006. Even if a new VA could have been recasted around the announcement's time in 2009, it would have been understandable to have been too soon. Second, a certain taboo on the history of Cartoon Network movies. And finally, third, overloaded schedules between both Abrams and Tartakovsky from 2009 to 2012. Because on one hand, Genndy was working on the Symbionic Titan, as well as the Sony Pictures juggernaut that would be Hotel Transylvania. Oh yeah, and also that movie that no one wanted, apparently. And while Abrams eventually got to work on a Star Trek sequel, there were 3 shows and 6 movies he was working on beforehand that would take up time from anything with Genndy. Even on Genndy's side, when asked about the movie at a 2012 film festival, he was still interested in continuing it, knowing people would be just as excited for it as well. But when Bob Osher, a president for Sony Pictures at the time, was talking to Genndy about it, he considered the idea for a movie to yeah, maybe. Which is both interesting and unfortunate of a response as well. However, the time came in 2017. A 5th season of Samurai Jack arrived to finally conclude the series with a proper send-off. It may not have been the original idea, but the semblance of it still made the return worth it in the end. You know, despite the mixed reception online. Aside from the doom and gloom, we got the story of the cancelled TV movie for Chowder, one of the most renowned golden era CN shows. It had all the comedy, heart, and style that any CN show would have for the time, but stood out for not just the comedy, but also how charming all of the characters were. It genuinely felt like the main cast was the family we'd follow for all their silly shenanigans to cook recipes and for Chowder to learn to be a chef. With the amount of attention the show got, both in its prime and legacy, it would be accounted for by its cast team, led by C.S. Greenblatt, a veteran in the cartoon landscape with his credits from SpongeBob, Fish fishhooks and his own show Harvey Beaks. To summarize this movie's history, however, it would be more simple and plain to elaborate. Like previously mentioned, the show started off with an exploding fan base for the time, and with that, Cartoon Network would give Greenblatt the opportunity to make his own TV movie for the show. The story would consist of Chowder finding a piece of a map to Pyland, riddled with the obvious, but also some lost treasure of the secret and ultimate gravy recipe, forged by Gravy Jones. The other piece of the map would be with Panini, so she and Chowder would have to team up to find Pyland and avoid obstacles over the movie's antagonist, Pikanehe. Pikanehe was inspired and planned to be voiced by Hollywood star Matthew McConaughey, yearning to have the gravy recipe so he can get the quote-unquote best tan in the world. But something really important to mention is this movie could have also explored the connection between Chowder and Panini, especially in the lead up to the series finale. But from what could have been, what actually happened? Well, the blog post from Greenblatt stated that there was a tight schedule in the midst of production around 2009, which was just a year before the show's end in 2010. However, not much was initially said besides that, right up until the release of this video by El Supersonic Q, which revealed that timing became slim because of Greenblatt's creative differences that couldn't be compromised into the movie. What kind of differences could have been made? Genuinely, I'm not too sure. But even if the opportunity didn't come up, at least Chowder actually got a proper ending. And the movie's ending came from the creator himself expressing the disapproval of the concept, in the same turnaround as his disapproval for the show.
Objects may be closer than they appear.
There's the haunted hotel.
If that's the hotel, I'm sleeping in the van. Who's with me? Route me in.
Now this is going to be an interesting segment for the video, not just because of how there's barely any information on the subject, but also from how there's barely any information from a franchise as iconic as Ben 10. I don't think I need to go over the series as a whole, nor the shows that shared similar attributes to it that followed. That aside, it had such a gigantic international reach outside of America, even having its own competitive game show on Cartoon Network, which was, again, something that was airing in other countries more than the US. Of course, with this reach, it would have its fair share of movies as well, like the episode compilation Secrets of the Omniverse, but like Samurai Jack, I'm not counting that shit. Among those movies, there was the first one from 2007, Race Against Time, which was adjacent to the original Ben 10 series. And 2 years later came the sequel, Alien Swarm, also being similarly connected to the second series, Alien Force. Finally, in 2012, there was Destroy All Aliens, a CGI movie acting as the original series' epilogue. While for the time they all had their moment to shine, it also felt like it was enough for the franchise to step into any big productions for a while. This is until you find out there was yet another movie that was announced in 2011, right between Alien Swarm and Destroy All Aliens. Because, thanks to the success that came from Race Against Time, it caught the attention of Joel Silver to sign on the distribution rights through Warner Bros. To be released in theaters, which would have been a first for the franchise. It's somewhat remarkable too, because Silver himself worked on smash hits such as the Matrix franchise, the Animatrix series, and the unforgettable classic, Brandon Bot Gets Grounded, the movie. Yeah, you got me there. I don't even know how the hell this is even a thing.
My office, Connor Wallace. I slapped Brandon Bot.
I'm so confused.
But with that aside, the supposed Ben 10 movie would be shaped to have a fresh but true idea for the movie, presumably starting out resembling the original series, which wouldn't have been too bad if it wasn't for the contract between Silver and Warner Bros. To end the year after the announcement and not renew any rights holding to continue the project. Honestly, I wouldn't have minded any new ideas that the movie could have taken, but with how much Ben 10 has grown as a franchise since 2005, I can have an it is what it is mindset for this one, especially with how mixed the reception would be for a new Ben 10 movie, or even project for that matter. So let's just cut to the chase. Considering we should all know about the basics of what Adventure Time is and its influence in the landscape, as well as the amount of influence the creator Pendleton Ward and a lot of the old guards such as Rebecca Sugar or Patrick McHale has, I'm not gonna go and pad out this video with exposition. Rather, I'll just give you the obvious. Technically, the idea of an Adventure Time movie isn't dead in the water or cancelled. However, the original prospects of an Adventure Time movie were canned, and there is a big, somewhat messy story to tell about everything that commenced with creating what will be. So please, I just ask that you bear with me on this one, because this one is pretty long. So, the first thing to go over is the initial idea of a movie, but not the feature film itself. Rather, a TV movie that was supposed to be the finale of the show's 5th season, which ended in 2014. Great for a second long existential intermission, huh? The only reference of this movie were some recently recovered storyboards of the premise from storyboard artist Jesse Moynihan, showing Finn going through the Dead Worlds and having a slight reference to the theme of what it means to be a hero, which could have been really exciting to see play out in its full intention. And, from what exists, it would have been a multi-episode long special similar to Elements, but involving something with the previously mentioned Dead Worlds and Orgalorg. You know, this guy. Kinda like... yeah, that one. However, as Moynihan stated, the movie was being written alongside the show, and the possibility of this special couldn't have made it through. Fortunately, the elements of the special/movie were used for later episodes and seasons, so who knows what could have ever come from it. Oh yeah, never mind that. Chat, wake up, the feature film confirmation came out. On February 27, 2015, the story broke that there was supposed to be an Adventure Time feature film in the works. It would include not only Pendleton Ward leading the project, but also Chris McKay and Roy Lee, two of the executive producers behind the Lego Movie, to help the idea get through Warner Bros. To publish. Since then, fans would speculate on what the movie would be about, only to come up with a quote-unquote Finn and Jake embark on their greatest adventure yet, possibly for the umptillionth time. Like that specific stake isn't given any time the show has a special coming up, but in terms of anything official, well, the announcement wouldn't be released out of nowhere. In 2015's San Diego Comic-Con, the crew and show director, Adam Muto, were asked about the movie on different occasions. However, both sources would implore that it was too early for anything to be said, especially from Adam's end. However, things were still in the works, and you know, they wouldn't have had this on their mind if it wasn't a prospect to begin with. The only obstacle that was ever discussed was how they were going to appeal to new viewers with a movie about an incredibly heavy, lore-based show like Adventure Time. Besides that, it was only a matter of time before it got shafted. Nothing else since. Just radio silence. I mean, me personally, I'm not really sure on why there'd be so much dismissal over it then, but it at least showed that there were no open horizons for any Adventure Time movie in a while. And then a whole 6 years later, at the 2024 Annecy Animation Festival, while there were some announcements for different side series from the show, there were also plans for the Adventure Time feature film to actually continue. This time, what is known about the project is that the lineup for production would consist of Adam Muto, Rebecca Sugar, and Patrick McHale, the co-creator of Over the Garden Wall. Just by the lineup alone, I'm incredibly excited to see what comes up for this movie, especially since we got so much news for the production of other shows and developments from Fiona and Cake Season 2. Even with production, it should be progressing smoothly, since the IP wants to be heavily pushed by... Alright, I think it's just about time. Well folks, this is gonna be a monster of a segment, because I got two movies that I'll be talking about here. And you'll see why I'm doing this, so just bear with me here. The first movie in this was actually gonna be a Cartoon Network/HBO Max original called Driftwood. Announced on May 6, 2022, the space opera of a movie would follow a mouse-like creature called Clover, who would go through a space adventure to find the titular town for its fuel and freedom from the antagonist, the evil overlord Thorn. All that's known as a synopsis. The fact that the movie's crew was led by Victor Courtwright, a man who was capable of a big project like this, with his resume from past movies and shows, this amazing looking poster, and oh yeah, it got cancelled 3 months after being greenlit. Meanwhile, on June 15th, 2022, another HBO Max movie was announced to be in the works called Bye Bye Bunny. The story went about as Bugs Bunny considered retirement to relax only to get the help from his friends to save Daffy from an obsessed fanatic. However, unlike the aforementioned movie, there was more information than a synopsis and a poster. If you look at the poster, you could see a Looney Tunes movie as a subtitle. Yes, a musical, as in actual songs for the movie, including one that was eventually released to the public that was just really good. Then, coincidentally, around the time of Driftwood's cancellation, it was reported that the movie would not be processed through HBO Max, despite future reports that the movie would still be in production. Before those future reports though, rumors spread that the movie's crew got laid off. A day later, it was explained that the studio loved the musical aspects so much, but the crew had to be redirected to work the music into the movie. Well, originally in the crew, they had award winners for music, screenplay, animators, and producers spearheading the film. You could tell from the leaked storyboards that were posted online that there was a lot of effort being put in, and it looked genuinely polished and something that would have been a treat for animation fans, right? Well, the story would be complete and there would have to be a new pitch with revisions. Well, would you look at that? The Bye Bye Bunny movie finally got shelved. Or so we thought, as apparently the moment layoffs happened, there was still a small minority of the crew working to get it greenlit. Around the announcement, it felt genuinely depressing hearing everyone involved, discussing their experiences working on the movie and how disappointing the rejection became for them. Well, at least it was worth it for the tax deduction. Oh yeah, by the way, do you guys want to hear a joke? Oh yeah, right, the transition. Let me repeat myself. What do you get when you come across a bunch of suits at dick o'clock in the morning laughing and scheming plans that would only benefit them, and never think about the people that would work for them or their audience? I'll tell you what you get. You get one of the worst decisions and projections made in relation to a streaming service, arguably having a worse reputation than its other competitors, not solely out of the quality of their decisions, but mainly the quantity of them. Think back on that last segment with Driftwood and Bye Bye Bunny. Both projects had the potential to be legendary, beloved by many, and with being shelved, both crews expressed their frustrations with that looming streaming service HBO Max and its current CEO David Zaslav. While the streaming service already had a good catalog to begin with, the problem with it as a whole was the need to fix things that didn't need fixing. Starting off, HBO Max and Discovery Plus sparked up ideas for their merger, Warner Bros. Discovery, the second Zaslav stepped in. But, most importantly, the biggest elephant in the room needs to be addressed to explain this. Did you know that there was some history with Zaslav and Discovery though? Yeah, believe it or not, he was the CEO of Discovery Inc. before the merger, and while there was debt amongst the company for a while, around the time of the initial phases of the merger, the company's debt went from this
That's good.
to this.
That's bad.
And when you have $50 billion to your company, of course, there would be some courses to correct. But have you ever heard of the one where the only improvement is the debt not even reaching halfway of its goal in 3 years and the CEO getting a bigger pay package? Well, it happened. But it's not even half the whole story. Since the merger took place, the first thing on those bigwigs' minds was cutting that debt. To sacrifice just a few billions each quarter, they had to cut off numerous projects to air and remove multiple shows from their service, especially in its nearby July 2022 quarter, removing OKKO, Uncle Grandpa, and the most notable one at the time, the live-action Batgirl movie. These moves were described by Zaslav as a shift in strategy. But the strategy only made things worse for the company, because with all these shows and movies proposed, established, or being removed, it showed not only how financially weak Warner Bros. Discovery was to keep up royalties for their shows, but also weak enough to not even give these creators a chance for their projects to shine. This isn't even mentioning the hypocrisy, or at least how mentally dampening in his ability to be consistent with his own strategies, which included holding importance towards established IPs, yet eventually backstabbing them once with Batman and multiple times with Looney Tunes. To keep it moving, the tax write-off arc in 2023 not only commenced HBO Max's name to change to Max, but also sparked the fire with Coyote vs. Acme being scrapped for a $30 million tax write-off, which was included in the bundle of tax write-offs for over $150 million. Yeah, and you want to know what came out of all of this? Aside from the obvious I previously mentioned, Max got renamed back to HBO Max, Zaslav got more money in his pockets, and in the most recent news, every single throwback Cartoon Network show has been taken off the air as of August of this year. My point still stands for animation. Fuck you, David Zaslav. You're the only human to put art and creative talent underneath your dying company for the profit you don't deserve to earn. What a trip down memory lane, huh? I want to make something very clear with this video. With all the movies I mentioned, they would at least have a sizable portion of the fan base to clamor for a chance to see their favorite characters be seen in a big way, full of fun and life. However, I wanted to make clear that even if the work is big enough to have some kind of dismissal or ignorance towards a creative work, it would be big enough to be open to the will of a circumstance. In other words, yeah, it is what it is. But think of it like this. Taking it back to Samurai Jack, sure, there are times a guy with power in a suit can see the enthusiasm of a creative and the audience they cultivated, and when asked of building something around it, could throw it in the air with a, yeah, maybe. Nonetheless, life still got in the way, and the movie couldn't have been done. Hell, a season 5 eventually came out, and with its own conclusion to the series. And for a send-off, it did a decent job, for what it's worth. Sometimes, however, big things are always going to have their obstacles, and sometimes detractors. But at the end of the day, I'm more honored to have known that they were even conceived. From the bare-bone details to a worthwhile delivery of something great, it shows the talent, the passion, and the effort that mirrored the work that was given. At least the attempts were there for these cancelled projects, and not even just their respective shows. That's why I tell everyone who felt that dismay, remember the values and efforts that the media you love went through, and let it inspire you to be better for your talents, the people around you, or yourself. Most importantly, cherish the past and the present. Feel the love that was given to things that you enjoy, and see what could have been given as an opportunity, not a disdain. Except that if the disdain was genuinely robbed, then go apeshit. Cause then again, David Zaslav can go
know your fucking place, trash.